How and Why with me, Phil Cohen. Today we're in the Natural History Museum of Tring to find out a little bit more about shofars. And I'm with the kids and we're going to look at what sort of what different types of shofars are, how they grow, what makes a non-kosher shofar versus a kosher shofar.
They look so cute. A baboon bottom.
Yes. Look at the monkeys. Can you see the monkeys, Small? Okay, for the purposes of this discussion, we're going to follow the Mishnah. And you can read the Mishnah in, if you've got an Art Scroll Machzor, for example, it's got Mishnah Rosh Hashanah in it. And we're going to start on the second Mishnah in the third Perek, which is on, I think, about page 120 in the Art Scroll Machzor. And the Mishnah differentiates between general category of horns, which it calls keren, and the specific category of shofar. Now, a horn, a keren, can include anything that grows out of an animal. And here we've got some beautiful examples. What the Mishnah describes as being a ya'el, which is an ibex. The broad category of horns can include anything from an elephant's tusk, which is technically a tooth, to any sort of bony outgrowth. But the difference between a bone and the shofar can be shown by the way they grow. So let's go and have a look at some skulls. So for the elephant, for example, the tusks that it has are simply teeth. So they wouldn't be suitable for a shofar. So you can see these tusks from a walrus. Again, they're made of solid bone. They're effectively teeth. So you're not going to be able to hollow that out very easily and make a shofar out of that. You can see this skull of a giraffe. Similarly, the horn, what you might call it, sticking out from its skull is simply just an extension of bone. These are antlers from deer. They're just spongy bone growth outgrowth, so they wouldn't be suitable for a shofar. They wouldn't be kosher. The shofar we use on Rosh Hashanah should ideally be a ram's horn. And the reason for that is it recalls the binding of Isaac, during which a ram was replaced with Isaac and offered up in his place. Isaac was the first person to be born Jewish, and his birth happened on Rosh Hashanah. In fact, we read about his birth and the binding of Isaac as part of the Torah portion that we read on the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. The ram in the story of the binding of Isaac is unlikely to have been one of the rams we have in Europe today that we see in the farm. It's more likely to be something like this. This is a morphlon that we can see here, and you can see those long, curly shofars growing out of its head. And here we have a morphlon grazing happily in a forest. See a kudu?
Yeah, there's a kudu.
Where's a kudu?
I left a kudu.
Right.
2 kudus.
Now this is a strange animal because the Yemenite community hold that this is actually okay to use, and you probably recognise the long curly shofars here. But to be honest, in the Ashkenazi community, we tend not to use them. They're very difficult to blow. And here's a kudu shofar. The Mishnah differentiates between a straight shofar, which was used for announcing the Yovel and various other temple ceremonies, and a curved shofar. And it says that the shofar that we use on Rosh Hashanah has to be curved. So whereas a straight shofar symbolises reaching out to God, the curved shofar shows that we are bowing in submission to his kingship.
Canada the short.
The Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah says that we can't use the horn of a bokor, a young cow. That's because it's considered to be a keren, but we've said that the word keren can include anything from a bony structure right up to a shofar itself. In fact, in the story of the Akedah, which we've said involves a ram, which we do use, the horns of the ram in the Akedah are actually described as being koronos, as being from a keren. The Gemara explains the by applying a principle called ein ketega nase snega, that because a cow was involved in a sin, the sin of the golden calf, we don't want to evoke the memory of that sin on Rosh Hashanah, so we don't use the horn of a cow on Rosh Hashanah.
Wow, Dad, look at those shofars.
Yeah, well, those are bisons and buffalo. Those would be considered a bokor. Those we couldn't use for a shofar. A shofar is made of keratin, which is the same sort of material that your fingernails and toenails are made out of. And it grows around a bony protrusion sticking out from the skull of ungulates, such as sheep and goats and so on. As ably shown by this skull here, which I couldn't find in the museum, but you can see it here in the shofar factory. Let's look at how a shofar's made. Firstly, they have to remove that bony structure from the inside of the shofar. They do it by boiling the shofar and bashing it about, as you can see here, with a hammer to get it out. Next, they need to make a straight piece by the mouthpiece, so that they can drill a hole through the remainder of the tip of the keratin of the shofar. They do this by heating it up and putting blocks on top to make it straight. Now they drill the hole. Finally, they fine it down and polish it to make it nice and smooth and clean. Just to end with a few general principles of the shofar, we use the shofar from the right side of the animal. Generally speaking, in Judaism, we tend to favour the right side. That's what most people most people are right-handed, so we tend to go with that. But it's important that you hear the sound of the shofar itself. That's what after all the Torah commandment is. So, in other words, you've got to hear the shofar live. Can't hear a pre-recording of the shofar, or hear it through an amplification system or any electronic media, or download the sound from the internet or whatever it is. You've got to hear it live, and you've got to hear the sound of the actual shofar. So if the shofar has a crack in it, that's going to affect the sound, the acoustics of the shofar, or indeed it's had glue put on it to fix a crack, that's going to affect the sound, and that would invalidate the shofar. One has to hear that the shofar mustn't be decorated in any way. It must be just a pure shofar. Yes, many of the shofars are buffed up and polished in a shofar factory, but that isn't seen to be affecting the sound in any way. And even the person blowing the shofar, in fact, some would say particularly the person blowing the shofar, has to hear their own shofar blowing themselves. That also means that one should listen to the shofar without interruptions, and should avoid, particularly for the first 40 blasts, any talking or distractions. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you found it interesting and informative. I wish you and your families Lashana Tova, a happy, healthy, successful new year, and thank you very much for watching. Bye bye now.